Okay, I've asked Paul Nugent, criminal defense attorney that I think a lot of you know, who is, there's nothing better than a peer-to-peer recognition. And I asked Paul to share what he admires about our next honoree. And while I had not met David before tonight, my impression of David is plain-speaking and outspoken, with two things I admire very much. As the distinguished professor at the University of Houston Law Center, our next celebrated champion is David Dow.
Good evening. Can you hear me without the microphone? I'm not used to in court, we usually don't have them. But I am honored to be able to say a few words for one of my legal heroes, David Dow. Representing people on death row and representing people accused of capital crimes is lonely work. It's exhausting work. It's depressing work. Standing in front of a judge when he's pronouncing sentence, he or she, and the judge says to your client who's been convicted, sentenced to die by lethal injection, is there any reason why I should not impose sentence? And your client says, I'm innocent, and then the judge says, therefore I schedule you to die by lethal injection. It used to be before sunrise, which was kind of macabre when they used to execute you at 1 or 2 in the morning. Now they do it in time for the evening news. But it is depressing, it's lonely, walking into a courtroom and the law's against you, the facts are against you, the judge is against you, public opinion's against you. It's unpopular, and although we as lawyers enjoy unpopular causes, because popular causes don't need us, popular causes do fine on their own, it is lonely and depressing, and you start waking up at 3 in the morning if you have a writ hearing, and how you do make the difference between whether your client lives or dies, and your head's always full of ideas. You go out with friends and you're not really listening to their conversation because you're thinking about your trial that you're going to start in a month, and whether your client lives or dies to some extent depends on how well you do. So it just wears you out spiritually and physically and emotionally. And David's been doing this day in and day out for years with little fanfare. He doesn't seek self-aggrandizement. He just does it because he's offended by this industry, the capital punishment industry. He's offended by injustice. He's bright. He's clever. As a lawyer, he could do whatever he wants. He could certainly represent the rich and the powerful, and wouldn't have to be hanging out with this crowd here. But that's why I admire David, and that's why he's my hero. He's just fights the fight. I've fought the fight intermittently, and I don't know, I couldn't do it. I didn't have the stamina or the personal courage that David Dow does. And it's such an honor to say a few words on his behalf. I know he's inspired scores of students at the University of Houston and elsewhere. I know if you're on death row, if you can have one visitor, it would be David Dow, and that's who you want. He's not there as your friend, he's not there as your advisor, he's not there as to make you, well, because you're lonely. He's there because he's competent and committed and just an excellent lawyer with a steel's fine and a lot of courage. So David, I'm very honored to give you this award. These are handmade in Corpus Christi, Texas. And thank you for your work.
I'm a lawyer, so that means I have to be argumentative. And so first I have to argue with Mary. She said there's nothing better than being introduced by a colleague. That's wrong. I'll tell you what's better than being introduced by a colleague. What's better than being introduced by a colleague is being introduced by somebody who you admire as much as it is possible for a human being to admire someone else. I just overflow with admiration for Paul. I've overflowed with admiration for him for as long as I've known him. And if it's true that he hasn't represented as many death row inmates as I have, it's only because he's got a whole bunch more kids than I do. That just takes all your energy away. That was the first thing that I wanted to argue about. The second thing that I wanted to, so now I've argued with something Mary said. The second thing I want to argue about is something that Paul said. And he said that it's lonely work. And it isn't lonely work. Because when I'm doing the work, I've got two images in my mind. One image is the human being whose life I'm trying to save. And the other is a room that looks just like this. Okay, the room, I can tell you something. The room that has the people who call in to 740 radio in the morning, like they were calling in this morning, saying that Dwayne Buck should be executed, even though the reason he was going to be executed is because of the color of his skin. The room that holds those people is larger than this room, but it's not the room that I picture. This is the room that I picture. These are the people who are my family, and thank you all so much. I just want to say a very quick word about the reason that I do this, and the reason that I appreciate the support of all of the people in this room for the work that I and the other lawyers who I work with do. The reason isn't just because we shouldn't be executing innocent people like Anthony Graves. Everybody thinks we shouldn't be executing innocent people like Anthony Graves. The reason is that we shouldn't be executing people like Dwayne Buck. I was prepared to stand up here tonight and say we had just executed Dwayne Buck, and I'm elated that I get to say we shouldn't be executing people like Dwayne Buck. But let me tell you something about how close Dwayne Buck came. This morning, an elected judge, Denise Collins, who signed the order directing that he be executed, had the opportunity to recall that death warrant. This morning, the elected district attorney of Harris County, Pat Lycos, who supposedly was coming into office to clean up the racist mess that her predecessor had left behind, had an opportunity to stand in front of Judge Collins and say, Harris County is not going to support the execution of someone who was sent to death row in part because of the color of his skin. And the district attorney didn't say that. In fact, someone from her office contested our effort to withdraw the death warrant, and Judge Collins didn't withdraw the death warrant. The Supreme Court intervened 30 minutes ago, but that usually doesn't happen. The reason that we shouldn't be executing people like Dwayne Buck is not just because he was sent to death row for an egregious constitutional violation, where someone said that he's more likely to be dangerous in the future because he's a black man. It's not just for that reason. And it's not just because killing is wrong. It's because we, as human beings, believe in the idea of redemption. Redemption has the same root as the word redeem, to reclaim. Even murderers, even some people who do horrible things, and Dwayne Buck did a horrible thing, are capable of reclaiming the people who they were before they did that horrible thing. They are capable of becoming people who won't do additional horrible things. And when we as a society execute someone, we both negate our belief in redemption and we make redemption impossible. It's truly people like you all who are defending the very idea and the very importance of redemption. And I thank you for this.